This video is an effort to change your mind. I recently asked on a YouTube community post what the most boring car from the last 50 years was, and I got a lot of answers. If you've read the title of this video, you already know what car won, but here's just a few interesting things from the data. Of all the marques, there were more votes for Toyota than all the others, but Nissan, Volkswagen, Vauxhall Opel and Ford all featured as makers of the most boring cars. But now here's a rundown of the top 5 cars you chose as the most boring. At number 5, the car I would have expected to win is the Toyota Prius. Toyota features heavily in this countdown, as at number 4 is a car that was for many years the #1 selling car in America, the Toyota Camry. At number 3 is one I actually didn't expect, especially as it's one of my favourite cars, but apparently its ubiquity and blandness single it out, the Volkswagen Golf, and the Jetta wasn't far behind it at number 7. At number 2, the follow-up to the Vauxhall Cavalier, but apparently the height of bland, is the Vauxhall Opel Vectra. But at number 1, and the subject of this video, which will change your mind, is the fascinating, wonderful Toyota Corolla. Toyota's small car in the early 60s was the Publica. It was created to answer the Japanese government's request for a national car concept. One important point Toyota would take to heart was the government's requirement that the car shouldn't break down or require significant repairs for over 60,000 miles. The car was basic, a little too basic maybe, as the car didn't even come with a heater. I mean, the post-war Japanese population was hardy, but not that hardy. Customers weren't enthralled with the Publica, and Toyota felt too much needed to be done to get it right. They'd been planning a new car to fit between the Publica and the larger Corona, but with the Publica's poor sales, it was decided this new car would replace it. The chief designer would be Tatsuo Hasegawa, who, as a fresh-faced university graduate, had designed a single-seater fighter aircraft during the Second World War. After the war, Japan wasn't designing aircraft, so he switched gears, and by the 60s he'd led the design on the Toyota Publica and was put in charge of its replacement. He would put in place an 80 points plus principle for the car. The Publica had been designed purely with cost in mind, but the new car would aim to get a high score, 80 points, in all categories and include advanced technology that the competition didn't have. Thankfully, the 80 points plus principle meant adding a heater. What this new car also had that the Publica didn't have was a more up-to-date style. The straight lines were smoothed off, giving a more elegant look. The gearbox grew an extra 4th gear, which was a bit of a risk, as cars with more than 3 gears were considered underpowered. Customers thought that this was a way to compensate for an insipid engine. They also risked putting the gear stick on the floor. Passenger cars had dashboard mounted gear sticks, trucks had them mounted on the floor. But it was all in an effort to make a more reasonably priced car with what Toyota considered a more practical arrangement. A 2-speed automatic was also available, mounted on the dashboard just in case. An original goal was to include an engine under 1000 cc's, but to beat the recently released 1000cc Datsun Sunny, Toyota decided to make it 1077 cc's. Ever since the Toyota Crown in 1955, Toyota had been naming its cars after words associated with the word crown, so the new car was called Corolla, which very roughly translates from Latin as small crown of flowers. The Corolla was launched in 1966 and was an immediate hit in Japan. It went up against Nissan's Datsun Sunny, released the same year. Like other iconic cars, the Corolla hit a sweet spot, giving just enough performance, comfort and a little bit of extra class for a reasonable price. With Japanese exports fueling an economic boom that was raising living standards for everyone and new expressways opening up across Japan, Toyota stores were renamed as Toyota Corolla stores as Corolla sales took off. Thoughts immediately turned to exports, and Australia released its first Corolla at the end of 1966. By 1968, they were being produced locally. Soon Toyota was gearing up to take on North America, and they would start with a series of endurance and cold temperature tests in 1967. It would appear in North American and European Toyota showrooms in 1968, along with a small facelift that helped it comply with North American safety standards. An estate version had already been launched, along with a van, which was essentially the estate with filled-in windows. And a month later, the more stylish fastback coupe arrived, the Corolla Sprinter. The Corolla was Toyota's big seller, and competition against Datsun's Sunny would be fierce. The Corolla was seen as higher end, but it also had a higher sticker price. It was winning in Japan, and thanks to Toyota's aggressive exporting and a further increase in engine size to 1.2 litres, it was starting to best its rival. Toyota tended to do a light update every 2 years and a new version every 4 years, so the Mark II Corolla arrived in 1970 as the 1 millionth Corolla rolled off the production line. Toyota would focus on improving the comfort with lower noise and less vibration and rattles, and a more effective heater. The Datsun Sunny matched the Corolla's new 1.2 and 1.4 litre engines, but the Corolla offered more interior space. By 1972, Toyota were offering a more powerful 1.6 litre 113 horsepower engine in the coupe in Deluxe, SL, SR or high performance Levin trim levels. Levin is apparently an Old English, possibly Viking word for lightning. The 1.6 litre engine would be used in Australian Formula 2 races, which would project an exciting sporty image for the car, and in some markets Toyota would release the coupe as the Toyota Sprinter to try to differentiate it. Toyota continued to open up new markets such as Indonesia, and soon the car would be assembled there, as well as in the Philippines. The car would get its customary 2-year facelift, and in 1973 a 5-speed manual gearbox was available for the first time. 1973 would be a seminal year for the Corolla. Already available in many worldwide markets, its small but pokey engine made it the perfect car in a world where the price of fuel had quadrupled in just 6 months. Sticker shock at the pumps left customers fleeing from gas-guzzling cars, and none more so than in North America, that not only had some of the least economical cars, but also further to travel in them. And with a depressed economy, fewer customers could afford expensive cars, which made the Corolla ideal. It's easy to think that Corolla sales boomed during this period, but the data doesn't really back that up. But it's clear that while sales of uneconomical cars took a hit, Corolla sales grew slowly. Daihatsu would do a deal to use much of the Corolla for the 1974 Daihatsu Charmant, which was also sold all over the world. The deal would last until the late 1980s, helping to further amortize the cost of developing Toyota's top-selling car. The Mark III Corolla arrived in 1974, with only the saloon and coupe getting an update to save costs. The Mark III was an evolution over the Mark II shape that both Toyota and Nissan were coalescing around. Both cars grew, but again the Corolla was just that little bit larger. The interior got smarter, but being the 1970s, there was oodles of beige plastic. The sporty Levin and Sprinter Traino would get fuel injection to give them even more power, and created a really sporty little car. However, American Road and Track magazine weren't impressed with the Corolla, calling it large and heavy and expensive compared to the competition, with crude suspension and inferior interior space and fuel economy compared to European competition such as the Volkswagen Rabbit. Despite this, the Corolla continued to sell well both in North America and around the world. Soon production expanded to both Thailand and New Zealand as more people grew to love this practical car. By 1976, Honda introduced the Accord that provided better competition than the smaller Civic. Japan's Big Three would bring a strong challenge to America's Big Three that would result in Honda's Accord becoming the #1 selling car in the USA by 1988. To compete with Honda's new Challenger, the new liftback version appeared, essentially a hatchback coupe, and the Corolla would get lean burn technology that helped meet new clean air rules while still allowing Toyota's small engines to provide a decent amount of power. Toyota's factory in Australia would soldier on with Mark III production until 1981, as the razor-thin margins on the car there meant no money could be spent to update the factory. Maybe to assuage those American motoring critics, the 1979 Mark IV Corolla would get updated rear suspension. It would also get a new angular style, as was the fashion in the late 70s. A new 1.8 litre appeared in some markets, along with a diesel, more for the commercial van version. Creature comforts such as power steering were available, along with an uprated interior that continued the angular style. Toyota had been working on the design for 5 years, prioritising fuel economy, comfort, and a design that would appeal to as many people around the world as possible. This would result in a design honed in the wind tunnel that some would consider bland. So while trying to appeal to as many people as possible, it put off others looking for a shape that was a little bit more individual. To show the Corolla had a fun side, it was entered into the British Saloon Car Championships in 1981 and would win its class the following year. Sales were going from strength to strength, so powerful was the Corolla name that in 1982 the Japanese Toyota Tercel was called the Corolla 2. And by 1982, 10 million Corollas had been sold, but Toyota couldn't rest on its laurels, so released a major new version in 1983. The big change was a switch to make it front-wheel drive. Although the Corolla continued to grow in size, the Honda Civic and Accord had grown so much, the Civic was now the Corolla's main competitor. And with the Civic being sold as a hatchback, the Corolla would go full hatchback with both 3- and 5-door models. The new aluminium engine was also a big leap forward, although despite the lighter engine, the car grew a little in weight. Of course, the Corolla wasn't just going up against Japanese competition, it was having a tough time making inroads into the European market where the family hatchback was king. They built the Corolla as a saloon first, so the hatchback, which was an afterthought, had a tough time competing. Toyota would focus instead on emerging markets and would start Corolla production in South America and South Africa. With North America imposing further export restrictions for Japanese cars to protect its domestic car market, GM entered into an agreement that would see Toyotas being manufactured in GM's Fremont factory in California, and GM would release the Corolla as the Chevy Nova in 1984. The Levin and Traino sporty models got a boost with the fabled AE86 development program. Also known as the Sprinter or GTS, it was still rear-wheel drive and would use the same 1.6 litre engine as the MR2 and Celica, giving it 128 horsepower. Some versions also came with cool pop-up headlights. The rear-wheel drive layout and powerful engine made it popular for rallying and club races, but it's now remembered as being an excellent car for drifting that in 2012 would inspire the Toyota 86. The 1987 Mark VI went to a more rounded look, which further improved the aerodynamics. Inside, the interior got a further update with large, clear dials and controls, but apparently loud, migraine-inducing red interiors from the 1970s were still a thing. With inexpensive competition coming from upstarts such as Korean Hyundai, the Corolla couldn't just trade on being cheap and cheerful. The Corolla estate got four-wheel drive for the first time, maybe in reaction to Subaru, who were having increasing success with its range of all-wheel drive cars. The sporty Levin and Traino models got supercharged engines with as much as 162 horsepower, but front-wheel drive setups reduced the fun, showing it's not just all about raw power. In 1988, GM-owned Holden in Australia also produced a version of the Corolla as the Holden Nova, with local Australian production starting up again. 2 years later, GM in North America would drop the Chevy Nova for the Geo Prism, based on the Japanese Sprinter version of the Corolla. But even not counting these variants, a worldwide economic boom meant growing Corolla sales. The first thing you notice about the 1991 Mark VII Corolla was its size, over 21 centimeters more than the previous car. In Venezuela it was nicknamed as the Big Camry, and in the Philippines apparently the Big Boy. It was part of Toyota's desire to create, in their words, a mini Lexus that would further differentiate it from the competition. They were rightly proud of their new Lexus line, launched just 2 years earlier, and it's clear that the new Toyota Corolla had a bit of an LS400 look about it, both inside and out. Small wonder then that the German Automobile Association announced it had topped their reliability survey for small family cars. It seems the Corolla had turned its back on its 1980s rebellious driving adolescence and had got a mortgage and 2.4 kids. Smaller panel gaps and further aerodynamic improvements would reduce drag to get better fuel economy from the engines largely carried over from the previous generation. By now, the car was getting all the 1990s modern features such as electric windows and mirrors, cruise control, a CD player, airbags and ABS. The 1995 Mark 8 Corolla was more of an evolution of the Mark 7 due to a recession in Japan. Many existing components were carried over to save costs, even the doors on some models, and corner cutting was clear both inside and out. This was a true world car being manufactured all over the world, but to try to crack the European market, design of the 3- and 5-door hatchbacks was passed to Toyota's European Design Centre. The new style Corolla hatchback will be manufactured in both the UK and Turkey with a diesel engine option from Peugeot. The strategy would bear limited fruits with 20,000 annual sales in the UK by 1998. But while 9 million cars have been sold in Japan since it launched, only around 300,000 have been sold in the UK. In Europe, Toyota would launch the sporty G6, although the song Like a G6 might have been thinking more about the Gulfstream Jet rather than the 1.3 Toyota Corolla. To show the abilities of their new car, Toyota entered the Corolla in the World Rally Championship, winning the 1998 Monte Carlo and New Zealand rallies, and they'd win the Manufacturers' Championship in 1999, celebrating with a G6R version. Just 420 were made, with a lukewarm 109 horsepower engine and a 6-speed gearbox to try and get some life out of it. The combined sales of more than 30 years had, by 1997, made the Corolla the #1 selling nameplate in the world, surpassing the VW Beetle. That same year, Toyota extended the Corolla brand with a Corolla Spacio or Verso MPV. It might have been called a Corolla, but was based on a completely new chassis. It must be daunting to design the next generation of a popular car, let alone the 9th generation. Toyota's chief designer Takeshi Yoshida was charged with moving the Corolla from its conservative style to a next generation car that would sell in even bigger numbers. But with the Corolla accounting for 20% of all Toyotas sold, doing something drastic could kill sales and Yoshida's career in the process. But Yoshida felt that this negative attitude prevalent at all of Toyota at the time was counterproductive. Best to be mindful of the remit he had, but to focus on producing the best car he could. He started with a clean sheet and a new chassis. Like the recently released Ford Focus, the new Corolla would focus on enjoyable ride and handling with new engines. The new car was once again designed to get a larger share of the European market. For the first time, it would be wholly styled there. The resulting design was supposed to be youthful and refined, but to my eyes the style seems as conservative as the designs that had gone before it. A multinational interior team focused on class-leading ergonomics and a premium feel. Even the glove box opening was weighted to make it feel like a luxury car. In many Far East markets, Toyota offered a premium Corolla Altis version designed to appeal to Toyota Camry customers who wanted a smaller car. It was a smart move and eventually became the most popular model in some markets. It was considered such a good design it was used as the basis for the North American Corolla, and sales expanded to Mexico for the first time. Since 1987, Corollas have been produced in Canada, and they now started turning out the Toyota Corolla Matrix hatchback, also sold by GM as the Pontiac Vibe. Toyota had entered Formula One, and the Corolla launched in Europe with a 1.8 litre 190 horsepower hot hatch version as a halo car to help it sell in a European market full of hot hatches. To up the ante, the Corolla Compressor arrived in 2005 using a supercharger to drive 215 horses through its better handling chassis. This new car for a new millennium sold well. Yoshida's design had struck a chord with customers. It also helped it was now being sold in the booming Chinese market. By 2005, an amazing 30 million Corollas had been produced. While the Mark X hatchback was still the Corolla in Australasia, in Japan and Europe it was now the Toyota Auris. In North America, the hip new Scion sub-brand would eventually sell it as the IM. But the wild hot hatch days of the 215 horsepower Corolla compressor had long gone. The top of the range, in the UK at least, was a reliable, dependable, practical 2.2 litre diesel. The regular Corolla got split into 3 different variants. Japan and Hong Kong got the narrow E140 version due to Japanese size restrictions and would be known as the Corolla Axio. The wide-bodied E140 found its way to Asia and the Americas. The updated E150 chassis would be used in South Africa, Europe, China and Australasia, and would also be used for the Auris hatchback. The Corolla was turning into a bit of a mini limo with leather seats, climate control, automatic parking, active cruise control and pre-crash brake assist. This was a time when telematics was a buzzword, in automotive circles at least. It was a feature that allowed drivers to get information such as the nearest restaurant from an online service, usually run by the car company itself. The Corolla got its own implementation, but the advent of smartphones quickly made these services superfluous. In Japan, Toyota had a history of associating a song with every new Corolla launch, and the 2012 Mark XI Corolla was celebrated with My Color by K-pop artist Honda. Surely a better name than the Mark V Corolla song, which was apparently called Nicely Cinderella Complex. Toyota again split the Corolla into 2 platforms, a smaller one for Japan and some parts of the Far East, and one 10 centimeters longer for the rest of the world. I'm sure there was some logic with how Toyota distributed the 2 models, but particularly in the Far East it seems pretty random. The platforms were diverging into 2 completely separate models, albeit with the same name, and each country put its own spin on the car with different trim levels and models. But at its heart, the Corolla stuck to the formula of a good value, dependable family car. The following year, Toyota would celebrate over 40 million Corollas sold, and it would get hybrid technology championed by the Prius over a decade earlier. With China rapidly becoming the top-selling market for the Corolla, there were 2 different styles, the standard Corolla and the Toyota Levin, which was much closer to the North American Corolla. With Toyota doing multiple deals with Chinese manufacturers, the 2 models were actually made by 2 completely separate companies. By 2018 and the Mark XII Corolla, China was the top market, followed by North America. The split platform strategy was a thing of the past, with all Corollas being built from the same chassis. In fact, the next generation platform will be used for the Prius, CHR and even the Lexus UX. With the chassis and drivetrain the same, there's now not much difference between a Prius and a hybrid Corolla. It might have only used one platform, but the Corolla would continue to be available in a plethora of styles and designs around the world for each local market. And while the hatchback had been renamed the Auris in 2006, by 2018 it was back to being called a Corolla. Like the GM and Daihatsu deals, Toyota allowed Suzuki to rebadge the Corolla wagon as the Europe-only Suzuki Swace, and both companies took a small stake in each other as presumably the start of a long-term relationship. The Toyota 86 had been an homage to the drifting AE86 Corolla in the 1980s, and in 2019 Toyota would make a Corolla drift demonstrator, showing that despite being 53 years old, the Corolla was still young at heart, or having a midlife crisis depending on how you looked at it. The Toyota Corolla for many people is the mass market car that's hit the sweet spot. Despite our different worldwide cultures, we all need to go to work, get the shopping or go on family trips. It's just the right size, just the right amount of power, just the right level of comfort for the money. In 2016, the Corolla celebrated its 50th anniversary. It's now produced in 16 factories in 13 countries, making it a true world car. This means that on average, one Corolla has been sold every 100 seconds since the first car rolled off the production line. No wonder then, for the past 10 years at least, it's been the world #1 selling passenger vehicle. The Corolla legacy continues with the Corolla Cross, with Toyota seemingly admitting that the market is moving to crossovers and their popular family car needs to adapt to survive. Not many cars get past 50 years and 12 generations with the same name, and Toyota is doing the steps to ensure the exciting Corolla lasts another 50 years. A big thank you to all my patrons for supporting me. To get early advert-free access to new videos or to appear in the credits, please consider supporting me using the Patreon link below from just $1 or 80p a month, and hit that subscribe button to get notified of new videos. Thanks for watching, and see you in the next video.